So welcome again to another episode of the Train the Trainer podcast, which I'm trying to bridge the gap between science and practice and science. And today I'm talking with, I hope this is the right bio, Professor Dr. Swen Körner. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Perfect.
Perfect. And he studied sports science, philosophy, German studies, and pedagogy, and was awarded the German Study Prize of the Körner Foundation in 2001. And his current research focuses on training pedagogy. This is also always difficult for me in English, pedagogic. The professionalization of police training and martial arts studies. So these are all topics I'm interested in, and our audience also. I can go on and on, but you have also a background in martial arts, in self-defense, and I came to know you and your work especially because you published a lot about police training and all the new ways. Did I forget something, Sven?
Maybe, but I guess it's not of interest. So everything is fine. Nice being here, Eric. Thank you so much for your invitation.
Yeah, great. So one of the things I just started this podcast a year and a half ago, and immediately talked to many people around the world, but not many are in Europe. There are a lot of scientists, and I talk with some people, like Roel Audians from the Free University. He's a colleague of mine, of course, but also, in Germany, also there's a lot of research by yourself, by your colleague Mario Staller. You publish a lot. And that's the first fascination point. How do you publish so much? Do you have more hours in a day?
Maybe. So the week has 168 hours. So I learned that fact, and we're good in using the time. So as always, it comes when you do it, and we have a lot of interest, and we are very motivated for research. So this is I think the main trigger for us. So everything we do, we like to do because we are very interested in all the science stuff, but we are also practitioners. We are coaches. We are coach developers. So everything we use out of science has also this practical background. This could be an explanation for our productivity. And what you mentioned at the start, it's quite interesting. We do have many police research in Germany as well, as compared to the Netherlands, the UK, or the United States, but we do have scarce research on police training. And I guess we kind of invented this domain of research. And as always, if you invent something, there's a lot to do. We observed several years ago that police training is a very interesting domain, and if we get into contact or facilitate the contact between police training and research, there is a lot to get for both sides.
And on a personal note, how did you become interested in police training and police education? Because you have obviously you have your background in sport and sports science and so on, and also in different forms of martial arts. But how and when did you become interested in police training?
If we look after what is going on in police and police operations and police training, it's at least comparable. I mean, it's about performance. It's about elite or high performance in some way, at least if we talk about special forces. And you have the idea of training that should prepare for the criterion environment. I think in this formal way, we have the comparison between sport training, coaching, and police training, police coaching. And that kind of interested me. So that is the one thing. The other thing is I do have a large martial arts background, let's say, and that was my first information I got out of police training, that many of the police trainers we're working with, we're talking with, also had this martial arts background, and there's a kind of commonality. And in Germany, we do have one domain in police education, which is called, let's say, self-defense and arrest techniques. And I was interested in what is going on there and how is the training going on compared to classical martial arts training in Germany. So, and the third aspect is I'm interested in systems. And you started your podcast with the idea to bring together research and police, and that kind of waked my interest right from the start. How is it possible to bring science and police training, let's say, a little bit closer? Because it's not that easy. We may talk about this issue later, maybe.
Can I ask you, but before we go into that, I'm intrigued by another question, and the question is as follows. I first give a little bit context. I have a mentor here in the Netherlands. His name is Henk Kraaihoff. He was an Olympic track and field coach, and he had a great love of Germany. And also in the early days, he went to East Germany and so on, because, and now comes the clue. His intuition was that if you only read English papers, you miss a lot. For example, research in German language, but also before that, Russian, research and so on. So recently, I also talked to Wolfgang Scholburn. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correct, from differential learning, and he also said something in the sense that there is more than just PubMed English papers. So my question now is, not sure how to frame it, but what are we missing in PubMed that is well available in German language and so on? Do you have other things going on of which we're not aware? Also, and then I'll stop talking. Also, I saw that you published a Police Conflict Management, Volume 2, Training and Education, the book. And also there was a sentence, you published this with Mario Staller and Benny Zeiser. And at the book, there was also a sentence, broadens the field by focusing on research beyond the US, including from the Global South. So is it good for us to also study science outside English papers? That's my question.
The short answer, yes,
okay.
Yes,
okay, let's move on. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
No, but the first time I saw it the way around. So for me, of course, I'm a German guy, and I used to read German literature, and we have a strong historical and theoretical and empirical background in pedagogy.
Yeah.
So I was concerned for years with German literature, and I think there's a lot to get out of it. And then I saw that there is international literature on pedagogy as well, and it's kind of spotting blind spots for each other. I would use this kind of picture.
Yeah.
So if you're concerned with what is going on in PubMed and somewhere else in different languages, you will get something out of it. And the way around is the same. So if I think research from the Netherlands or from the UK or from the US is interested in what is going on in Germany, they will get something. But of course, English is, let's say, the main language to talk about. And we are really happy to have this kind of internationalization regarding the discourse of police training, because we are inspired by a lot of research from a lot of people you already mentioned. And you already talked in this podcast, and I think it's a benefit for the German situation and for what we are aiming at.
Yeah, and especially within the realm of pedagogy, if I'm pronouncing it correctly now, in the Netherlands we have a strong philosophical pedagogical tradition with Gert Bista, with other philosophers, but also, of course, our physical education was heavily influenced here in the Netherlands. Our physical education was very much influenced, for example, by all those movements in Germany, like Jahn or Froebel, whatever, all those real pedagogical philosophical traditions, and I have the impression that it's important to also know those traditions. I learned a lot from these, so to speak, and I'm not sure if they are also available in the US and so, that kind of traditions, because pedagogy seems to be another thing there. It's more about motor learning, I guess, eh?
Yeah, it's more. I mean, that is really interesting and irritating for the German literature. So in Germany, we have a strong, as I said, historical background, but we were interested in international literature. So Jean-Jacques Rousseau, for
Yeah,
example. I guess we will talk about nonlinear pedagogy
yeah,
in
of
this
course.
podcast, and Rousseau would kind of smile with viewing
Yeah,
of modern nonlinear pedagogy because what he promoted was the idea of indirect education, and I mean if you read his book Emile or about
yeah,
education, you will have a template on what to do with the constraints-led approach. So
yeah,
it's good to know that. On the other hand, it's good to see for me, at least, how pragmatic international
yeah,
educational research is in some way. So they're on the point. They're on the point of functionality, which is not that let's say mainstream topic in Germany. So we are
yeah,
critical about everything that has to do with functionality. So
yeah,
it's solely functional.
yeah,
Let's
yeah,
say an expression
yeah,
of the modern neoliberal society or
yeah,
something like that. So I think, as I said, to spot the blind spots of each discourse
yeah.
could be a benefit in the reciprocal observation of literature and science.
Okay, then before we move on to your vision on good police training and ecological dynamics and non-linear pedagogy, first one more question, and I'm sure nobody understands it right now anymore, but I'm okay with that. You wrote a very interesting paper. It was about, this is a very difficult term for me, reflexivity. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure. And you talked about an article by Benel et al. And so forth and so forth. And now is the sentence, and this is the sentence you wrote. While Benel et al. Emphasized the importance of evidence-based policing for the further professionalization of policing, we advocate for reflexivity. Can you pronounce it better? Is this good?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Reflexivity, just reflexivity.
We advocate for reflexivity in modern police practice and research. Reflexivity calls for the analysis on preconditions and consequences of scientific perspectives themselves. Sorry, this can be better. Reflexivity calls for the analysis on preconditions and consequences of scientific perspectives themselves, thus touching issues of evidence. I, my intuition, this is very important, but can you maybe explain it, what you mean?
I'm not sure when I understand my own sentence there. It's rather easy. So the first thing would be to differentiate what it not is. So reflexivity is not reflection. So it's not
Ah,
sitting on the chair and observing the environment and thinking about your life. It's not only thinking. Reflexivity means that it could be beneficial to bend back to the assumptions that you have, the assumptions about the world, the assumptions about people, the assumptions about violence, the causes of violence, the assumptions about teaching and learning, all the assumptions you have, to lean back to them and to question them at some point. For example, if you're confronted with empirical data that questions your nonlinear approach or your linear approach, what would you do? And it would be reflexive to think about it. And, for example, to give the opposite a try. So if you're convinced that linear pedagogy is the best way to go, and you see some empirical data that nonlinear pedagogy could also work, give it a try, give nonlinear pedagogy a try. So that would be the outcome of reflexivity.
yeah.
If you observe that, or pick some data that, for example, police operations are not predominantly occupied with dealing with violent encounters, what would you do in training, for example? Would this change something? Would you put more social interaction training into your task design? So this means reflexivity on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's leaning forward. So being interested in the effects that your actions have. So evaluate your actions. So question your pre-assumptions is the one side of reflexivity, and evaluate what you're doing and learn something out of it would be the other outcome. So it's quite easy, I guess. And
Yeah.
we brought it kind of in opposite to the solely evidence-based approach, which is a fashion at least as I see it at the moment. So we want to make evidence-based decision with it, which is fine, but we could at some time question, okay, what is our premise of this kind of evidence-based research? So for example, we have a lot of research going on with violence, with violent encounters, and derived from that with performance under pressure, and from there derived with managing with stress. And that's fine, because we can assume that violence and stress are operational demands we have to handle within police operations. But I mean, there are also times of nothing, as Rowe called it, quiet times in police operations where the opposite may be the demand. So that would be a practical application, let's say, of reflexivity, and opposite to the solely evidence-based approach. And it kind of derives out of my systems theoretical upbringing. So in systems theory, we make the distinction between first order observation, so we're doing what we're doing, and the ability to make a second order observation. So we step aside. So I was sitting here and to look, okay, what is the situation at? What have I been thinking while sitting there? So being able to get from the first order observation to a second order observation. And all I can say is, if you do that at some point, it's beneficial for your first order observation. It may lead to a change in action.
And what was the incentive? Maybe you already told. What was the incentive of the paper you wrote? Because the paper was called "Toward Reflexivity in Police Practice and Research." This was just to ask some attention that there are other perspectives possible, or what was the?
Yeah, the point is, and Greg Bonnell and colleagues did a very important thing. They kind of listed urgent issues of police and police training. And our point was solely to say, okay, at least for the German situation, it's up to discussion what is urgent. It's not clear at the moment. So we, for example, do not have representative data of what is going on in police operations. So we should be careful in defining what is an urgent issue. As I said, if we observe police training, and we are very much into it, we observe, let's say, a lot of violent encounters in scenarios and simulations. And the question is this, let's say, the right proportion regarding what is really going on in police operations? And our question, at least geared towards the German situation, is we do not know yet. Because we do not have qualitative and quantitative scientific data about operational demands. We only have single anecdotal evidences on, okay, there's violence going on, there's stress going on, it's dynamic, it's sometimes aggressive, but it's not systematically and representative data.
That's a great point. There is a brilliant researcher here in the Netherlands. I'm sure you know her, Wendy Dorrestein. And I'm not sure if her PhD is already finished, but she exactly studied this question. What do we see in training, and what do I see in police practice? And if I'm not wrong, this was the exact conclusion she also had, that most of the scenario training ended in lethal force, but most of the time in real life, it doesn't go that way. So that's a great question. So let's talk about one of the main topics you write about. Is, I'm not sure how to frame it, because framing is important, but one of the first articles I read was, I'm not sure if you were the co-author, but Mario Staller was the author. It was developing problem solvers. And later on, there came a lot of articles about nonlinear pedagogy and so on and so on. So how do you view police training? What is the nonlinear approach?
Oh, that is a hard question. We can delve into with the idea of problem solving, if you like. So this was an article by Mario Staller and I guess Benny Zeiser. And I mean, the point is, within this idea of problem solving, first, the idea or the assumption is that police officers have to recognize what is a problem or what is key in the situation at hand, and on the other hand, to solve this problem.
Yeah.
So to recognize and to solve. And if you take these two demands or capabilities a police officer should have, we can observe training and question police training. Does it really equip police officers with the ability to recognize and to solve the problem in an appropriate way? And the impression was also only anecdotal that the police trainings we observed and we took part has problems regarding this issue. So the question was, what is exactly the problem and why, and why this solution and only this solution? And this kind of led to the nonlinear pedagogy approach. If we think about life, the world, society, social interaction, police, citizen interaction, teaching, learning, they are all complex. There are so many elements, and from your perspective, you aren't able to control all those elements, which is the definition of complexity. And the feature of complexity is nonlinearity. So we do not see that the same cause does always have the same outcome, or that a certain outcome is always caused by a single cause. We have deviations. Mm-hmm. We have sometimes chaotic situations, something like that. And if that is the case, so if the German railway is chaotic and nonlinear, if human social interaction is, so there's a likelihood that police-citizen interaction is also. And if teaching and learning is nonlinear, and we know that out of research since decades, so why don't we train that way? Or at least why don't we use this idea and at some points within the police training? And this was the starting point for us to delve into this discourse on nonlinear pedagogy, ecological dynamics, and constraints-led approach, because the idea is to represent what is presented in real life and police-citizen interactions into training, like on a mixing desk, and to play with this idea. This is our approach.
Yeah. Can you, and how does this approach look like in police training? What are some fundamentals, and what is important for you in this approach?
So first, it's important to make some reflexive considerations. So what are my assumptions about teaching and learning? What is my role as a coach or as a trainer? So is the learning process of my students something that is caused by me, or is it caused by some circumstances that are arranged by me as a coach? Mm-hmm. So reflecting on the role of a coach or as a trainer, reflecting on the meaning and the role and the function of techniques versus principles. Because if we observe complex situations and nonlinearity, we see a lot of deviation, we see a lot of variability within problem solving, and also within recognizing what a problem is. So how to deal with that. Yeah. And in which range or bandwidth is it okay for police officers, to come to the same outcome but in a different way? Yeah. And at least our observation was, okay, there are many situations where it's totally fine if a police officer can restrain a citizen in different ways. The goal is to restrain the person. You know, yeah. The idea of we need consistency in the outcome, but not consistency in the execution per se, and which meets the individuality of police officers.
Yeah. And because you are a martial artist, and I'm just always asking myself, when I started karate, it was the ideal technique, and you do what they show you and so on. Mm. Was it also your experience in martial arts, or did you already have a more playful game sense approach when you practice martial arts?
Yeah, in my martial arts career, there was also this felt gap or difference between what is done in training and what is done in competition. So I've been an elite athlete in full contact, and I mean, if you fight full contact, I guess you know it. Everything is different. You know, if the shit hits the fan, you have to adapt. So, and it's a very good example of you need consistency in the outcome, but the way to reach my goal varies from situation, from opponent to opponent, from a different individual precondition to the other precondition. But the training was heavily focused on automatization of ideal techniques, let's say. And it was also always the feeling, okay, that is not really fitting. You know, if you put those techniques into context, we have to take into account a lot of changes. We have to adapt. And it's not only in martial arts training. Sometimes I guess family education is rather linear, or skill education is linear. A lot of things I experienced in school and university lectures have been linear. You know, you have to reproduce what the teacher says. So we're kind of quite interesting self-observation for me to see, okay, you're heavily influenced by linearity, and nonlinearity was a really heavy irritation at the beginning for me to be more open to this idea and to play with it.
But the fact that linearity plays or played such a prominent role in education, in physical education, in martial arts training, what do you have any idea why? What are the historical or philosophical assumptions of the linear approach? Because if we talk so, it seems obvious that linearity is not always the best thing, but still it happens a lot. Are there any? Are you aware of the historical or philosophical foundations of that approach? Because it exists anyway.
Yeah, I mean, and also there are some criterion environments in which linearity is a good thing because they are, let's say, less complex. You know, there is a room for being linear. For example, as a university lecturer, we do have multiple choice tests, and I mean, it's an expression of linearity, and it works. It's functional. You know. But it's not about producing creative students with their own ideas. It's about testing them if they're able to reproduce what I have said. So there are many, many, many areas in the modern society where linearity has its place. And we can question them regarding police operations. I think it's hard to say that we had a lot of linearity interactions, for example, going on in real life.
Yeah.
So, and this would account for a more non-linear approach.
Yeah.
We have martial arts, which are less complex in competition and less complex in tasks, and their linearity has its place. You know, if I know what the problem is and I expect what you do, we can kind of exchange linear learned techniques.
Yeah.
But at that point where the situation becomes open, where more elements come into play, we have to turn into this idea of nonlinearity, and we have to learn to adapt to the situation. So I guess both has its places in modern society, and linearity, as you mentioned also, is a tradition in many powerful institutions that are responsible for our socialization. And my view is that a lot of the people have problems with the nonlinear and the ecological approach due to their socialization at many points in our society where they used to learn in a linear way. You know, they expect the teacher to tell them what to do and to show them what to do and to correct them what to do.
So is this a kind of assumption of the learner that I expect my master to tell me what to do, or my teacher? Is that a cultural, what? Yeah, you already said it is socialization, isn't it? Yeah.
I would say, and that is one of the outcomes of a recent study with the live defense performance, where we compared a linear and a nonlinear approach. And it was quite clear, at least due to retention tests for the surprise attack, where the police recruits had to perform defense, that the nonlinear group was very good at defending this kind of defense. They were faster, had more success in defending, there were less hit, etc., in comparison to the linear group. But they told us, in qualitative data, that they needed or wished to have some ideal technique from us. So that was quite interesting to see their psychological need for orientation due to an ideal solution. And that raised up the very interesting question for us as coaches, okay, how to deal with that? We know, or at least we assume, that nonlinear is better in terms of preparing police officers for the real demands of police operations. But on the other hand, we do have learners in this room, and they ask us for ideal technical solutions. So how to deal with that? And this led to a kind of trade-off for us, to the idea of a more situational approach of coaching. So if we identify a student need for an ideal solution, we present an ideal solution, but just as an offer, knowing that we had to put this ideal solution also into context afterwards. So that is a quite challenging topic, how to deal with those both approaches, which are or have their right, I would say, each.
I recognize this as a teacher at the physical education myself also, because I have some students who want to hear from me what they have to learn, how they have to learn, what the correct answer is for this problem, and so on. And we have a kind of philosophy at the University of Applied Physical Education that they have to find out it by themselves, like more coaching, but sometimes, and also as a psychologist, sometimes I have a client who wants to hear from me something, and I recognize the dilemma because. And it's great. I always ask if I can give you an answer I would do if you like, if I feel the need. I think we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, and that is really important. It's one part of what we call professionalization in coaching. So for us, coaching is a profession, and to be a professional coach requires to make sound decisions, for example, in the how dimension, how to teach. And the solution for us is to be pedagogical aware in the situation at hand and to see what is needed. Of course, we do have a predominant, let's say, focus on nonlinear task design. But if we observe there is a need for ideal solutions, we present them. So that is a kind of trade-off, which in my mind is an expression of professionality. Because if you only insist of, okay, nonlinearity is better, it's more functional, there's the risk that your students don't buy in.
Yeah, but even now we're talking about it, I even think that if your philosophy is non-linear, so but you as a teacher yourself are only giving one ideal solution to your students, that is the non-linear approach. It sounds a little bit contradictory also, because now you're doing it. There have been many movements.
It's a question, let's say, really of the coaching process. I mean, I do. If I introduce a linear technique, I'm not making fun of it, but I do say, for example, so this is a East Bavarian secret technique. It's my favorite technique, and it's presented in a way that it's clear it's only an offer. And there is so much non-linearity within this linear teaching, because I'm not really concerned whether they deviate in terms of an ankle or something like that, or the hip rotation is not as it should be in a linear fashion. I'm totally cool with it, but I give them this technique. They learn how to elbow strike, and I think it's for them, for this moment, very important to have this technique. And I can observe that it is a motivating thing. And you lose that would be my my take of it. You lose people only if you insist of what is functional and what is right and what is evidence based. So we have to be able to make this trade off. And
Great. Yeah.
I was remembered on Luhmann, who is a sociologist as well, a systems theoretical guy, and he said it in the 70s. So you need to have this pedagogical awareness. So as police officers have to have situational awareness, you as a coach have to have this situational awareness as well, and he called it pedagogical awareness. So
Great.
to observe and to depict what is needed in this group, what is needed
Yeah.
in this individual, what is his moment state, what is his or her rate limiter, etc. And not only applying to your plan, your
Yeah.
pre-planned training.
Yeah, exactly. We have here a course in the Netherlands. It's called, I think, pedagogical sensitivity or pedagogical
Yeah.
tact, which is, yeah, exactly what you're talking about. There have been many movements in education also, and some of them were born in Germany, where I think the same thought processing was also like Montessori, like Froebel, like no, in France, of course, you had Rousseau. So there have always been these, how do you say it? These voices of giving more, what would I say? Giving more room to exploration, problem solving, and so
Mhm.
on.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea of exploration, the idea of education due to context and not
Yeah,
due to linear approaches centered around the teacher or the trainer, the focus on individuality. You mentioned Maria Montessori. I think that is interesting, really. And again, so this leads to the question: what can we learn from, let's say, German-based educational literature? Maybe this. And there's also learning out of international literature
yeah,
of nonlinear pedagogy at the moment because they're claiming the same exploration, individuality,
yeah,
the role and function of context, but the foundation is different. It's an evidence-based approach. So if we talk about individuality in terms of nonlinear pedagogy, we talk about, let's say, hard facts like the musculoskeletal system,
yeah,
which has ridiculous amounts of degrees of freedom for movement control and coordination. And it's already interesting in my lecture. I give the example of grabbing a glass of water. Now I'm asking the students, how do you grab your glass? And they show it me usually with the one hand and then the other hand. And then I question them, okay, there are different possibilities. Okay, both hands. Okay, and what is the goal? Yeah, I want to drink. So do you need your hands? No, I can
yeah,
put my mouth to the glass. So we kind of explore this empirical fact of degrees of freedom. And I would say this is something that is added through this reform pedagogical discourses because they were more, let's say, ideologically based
yeah,
or kind of philosophically based in their reason for individuality.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Do you know the work of Gert Bista? Do you know him,
No,
Bista?
no.
He's a Dutch philosopher of education. He wrote many books, but also he wrote a book, uh, The Beautiful Risk of Education. And he has many points, but one of his points was that if education becomes more and more efficient, like making your learning goals, the right methods, the right way to teach, and then you put the learner, and then you end up with exactly what you predicted beforehand. And he saw some problems with that. It became a little bit mechanic, like mechanistic. And I think one of his goals of education is what he called subjectivation, which is a difficult word. I think more it's not Bildung, because in Bildung you still who builds whom, eh? Like, but it's more like becoming a person in the world, a little bit like emancipation, so that the student also learns to say, thank you so much for your teaching, but I have my other thoughts of I can, yeah, that kind of. How is it important in your philosophy that your students become let's say, yeah, how do you say that? Become aware of their own assumptions, that they can deviate from your teachings and so on. Is that important for you in coaching and training?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it actually developed out of this idea of nonlinearity, because nonlinearity in the first glance is functional. It's about functional problem solving. Find your own functional solution for a situation at hand based on your preconditions, right? But from there, you can make the arc to, let's say, psychological research on self-determination, autonomy.
Yeah.
And from there, you can rely on the point, okay, it's a value on its own to be autonomous, to make your autonomous decision and to evaluate your decisions, to change, being able to change your decisions, to develop the stability of change, as Carol Drake would call it, to develop a growth mindset kind. So Bildung in Germany or subjectivity are very strong words. You know, they want to reach everything with one process. I wouldn't go so far, but to start at a certain point and to be reflexive in the way we defined it, to lean backwards to your pre-assumptions, lead to the idea of, okay, I can be an autonomous person, I can be a competent person, and I can be a person which is a good person in terms of social interaction. So from there, I think there is the possibility to discover this, let's say, overarching value over police training. Police training or martial arts training in the first glance is concerned with functional problem solving. But from there, there's a chance, depending on how you teach and how you set incentives, for example, for reflexivity to come to that point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I now remember Bista makes a distinction between the three goals of education. It's called qualification, so teaching the skills needed for the profession, socialization, which speaks for itself, I think, and then the third one, which is not building, but it's like subjectivation. And I always play with those things because, for example, pure socialization can become indoctrination, of course. And pure qualification can become a system where they only, they're only preparing for the test and so on and so on. How did you came upon the constraint-led approach? Because you from nonlinear, is this a particular model you like, the constraint-led approach, or is it one of the models you like?
So in general, I'm easy with models. So I don't want to be dogmatic with the models. The first contact was the contact to nonlinear pedagogy. And I was due to socialization. But then at a certain point, as I understood, okay, these are the key, let's say, concepts of nonlinear pedagogy. So the nonlinear relationship between cause and effect. And I mean, I have to have practical evidence for that almost every evening in training. So I'm able to parry a punch like this. I'm able to dodge. I can step away. So it was kind of clear for me. It was sticky. It was evident on a daily basis that there is a good point of getting more into this nonlinear pedagogical approach. But from there, the question arose, okay, what does this tell us in terms of concrete planning of task design and training? And that was the point where constraints-led approach came into play, because the constraints-led approach, in my opinion, is a very cool approach in terms of it's easy to understand, and it's evident. I mean, that human behavior is shaped by constraints. I experience that all the time. So if I'm hungry and at university and I want to get lunch and I see while I'm moving to the Mensa that the lecture hall is opening and a large group of students is coming, I will adapt. I will move faster because the task is to get my lunch, So it was very impressive for me to see how simple a theory can B that explains human behavior and human movement behavior very well. And to see that if you take this model, if you take this triangle of, okay, we have task constraints, we have individual constraints, and we have constraints within the environment that shape my behavior, to use that as a template for the planning of training. I mean, if you know what your learning goal is this evening in Krav Maga training, you can think about, okay, if situational awareness is my learning goal, how to manipulate, for example, the environment to get a more likelihood of my students of being aware of the situation. Or how can I manipulate their situational awareness? For example, due to pad drills that fatigue them, or how can I alter the task? For example, they have to protect the third party, not only being situational aware for themselves, but also for others. So it was very convincing for me on a, let's say, scientific level. It's a very good, very elegant explanation of human behavior. And also it's a template, and it is more a template of planning training than the nonlinear pedagogical approaches. And I know you're into this literature too. If you read some nonlinear pedagogical research, it's often not that clear what did they do, what was the intervention, and how can I copy that as a trainer, or how can I use it and play with these ideas. And I think the CLA, constraints-led approach, is a very hands-off, easygoing, and also in scientific terms elegant, and I would say kind of true approach that explains human behavior.
So you also teach this approach to your students, and this is also one of your
always. I'm a coach in martial arts and self-defense. I do have a private school, and I do teach martial arts at my university. So it's a mandatory content of their student programs. I, of course, do also teach in seminars and lectures. And I'm always working with the CLA, even in theory-based seminars. I'm constraining tasks, I'm constraining environments, and constraining individual states. I'm playing with the idea of game-based learning, gamification, which is the old idea of Rousseau, to design games in order to make a desired behavior more likely. So it's all CLA, but of course I used that before, but I didn't call it CLA because I didn't know this approach.
Yes, and did you also try it out approaches like teaching game for understanding?
No.
Okay.
I know them, but yeah, I mean that would be another, let's say, alternative, which would be a good to have in your toolbox within my how dimension of teaching.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
the idea is to have many options to teach, but the idea of game playing games for understanding. I mean, I'm foremost into the practical martial arts and self-defense stuff. So it's not a game like basketball or soccer or something like that. I think if I would be a coach in this kind of sport, I would use that approach more often.
What do you see as some of the improvements we can make in police training? Do you have some thoughts about that? What can we, and I know you've written a lot about this, and you and your colleagues and so on, but now we're just talking. What can we do better in police training or in coaching police officers?
It's a hard question again. So first, I have to be humble. I'm engaged and interested observer from the outside. I'm not a police officer. I'm not a police trainer, and I first have to acknowledge that they are doing a good job. And many police officers and trainers we're working with are very open-minded. They do have a growth mindset. Are very interested, and we're working together on solving the problems they observe within their practice of training. So that would be the approach, I think. And from there, I can only say that many police trainers confirm that there are many things that could go better, at least here towards the German situation. So in Germany, we call police training Einsatztraining, which means it's training for operation. and there's a responsibility to equip police officers with skills and abilities they need in operation. And many trainers tell us that this is not the case. That this is not the case, and it has something to do with the curriculum in terms of the contents. So in Germany, the police education curriculum is structured by, let's say, solutions, firearms training, self-defense and arrest techniques, tactical training, but not by, it's not structured by what is going on in police operations, domestic violence, traffic stops, etc. So that is one point many police trainers say, which is critical. The other point is the teaching point, the delivery point. So there's a kind of self-referential loop, let's say, for decades going on with the tradition of linear approaches. And it has a, I guess, very interesting origin because police training is heavily associated with martial arts training in Germany. So originally, almost every police trainer was a jiu-jitsu guy, or at least a martial arts guy, and we guess that the kind of delivery and pedagogy from their martial arts, spilled over into police training in a non-reflected way. And that is kind of interesting. And many police officers and trainers criticize that. And they say, okay, we have to have modern approaches away from system towards pedagogy, which was one of our first articles, from system to pedagogy. So be more open-minded in terms of what works in teaching and in coaching, and not what works in terms of a certain martial arts style. So that would be another point besides the content I mentioned, to focus more on ideas, modern ideas, evidence-based ideas, but also ideas of reflexivity in terms of police training.
Yeah, great. Yeah. What if you are a police trainer, coach, do you have some, how can they develop themselves more? Of course, they can come to your courses, but do you have other ideas if you are a police trainer or coach, or maybe a training coordinator? What can they do to step up the game and becoming more knowledgeable into all the things we spoke of, nonlinear pedagogy and CLA? Do you have any?
Well, I'm actually not sure. The move forward science is something I would recommend, because I mean it's a tricky relation between science and police education. Science has to be able to be interested in what are really practical concerns in police training, and that's not mainly the case. Usually scientists speak out of their certain disciplinary perspective, and they solve problems which do not exist in real life. They're doing their laboratory experiments and stuff like that about decision making, but it will not transfer, not from the content and not from the language scientists use. So I think we need some structural couplings in a way like you do, Eric. So to have some guides who are interested in science and who aim to translate. So what is going on in recent science, and what are new ideas of teaching and learning, and to make them comprehensible for everybody. And that is no offense, because it's as it is. Science has its own language code, and it's sometimes horrible. I have 3 kids and a wife, and they're always telling me, Swen, stop talking this way. It's something that we are socialized in, but we have to reflect this. And I think we need this kind of structural coupling. So we do have many interested police trainers, and many of them are talking to us because they say, okay, this idea of nonlinearity, this idea of bringing police training more close to the demands of police operations, that is something that interested me all the time. Somehow they find a way to us. But on the other hand, there are many, as far as I observe, podcasts from you, from I think Chris Butler and other guys who make a very good job to translate
that's the point,
what science has to offer.
Yeah, that's always the point because it's sometimes so difficult, especially to police officers themselves, but also with trainers. And there you are talking about constant led approach, and you see the empty eyes, like, what the fuck
Yeah.
what are you talking about? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how is it in Germany? I mean, I think in the Netherlands right now there is, because we're a small country, but there is a decent coupling between some scientists like Raoul Audians, Peter Renden, Matthijs Koedijk, and Vanna Hutter, and so on, who I think are doing a great job in bridging the gap. So I think in Holland they are moving forward. How is it in Germany? Is this a Are you going good? Are you going good with the coupling between science and police training? What is your impression?
So just from a personal perspective, yes, because we have a lot of exchange during the last years with different police organizations, from normal police to special units. And for example, we have one federal state that turned around their police educational program for special forces
Yeah.
around ideas of self-determination
Yeah, I
theory
saw it. Yeah.
and constraints-led approach, which is amazing to see. And
Yeah.
these are police trainers with a very growth mindset kind of mentality. And I would say this is a very good example. But on the other hand, I mean, we were carried out, for example, by another organization. It was a military organization because it was too much, let's say, irritation within what we said and what we did in training. So
Yeah.
they couldn't get along with the nonlinear stuff at all. They told us, no, the linear way has to be the way we teach our special forces. We have to look after the stance. We have to look after the right angle.
Mm.
So that is the truth, you know.
Yeah, of
So
course. Yeah.
it's so and so, but of course, we are focusing on the police organizations and those many trainers who are open to work with us and to work with the ideas. And it's good to see, as always in education, they can do it on their own. I mean, that's the idea of reform pedagogy, of Rousseau, help people to solve their problems on their own, you know.
Yeah.
And we see that at many points in Germany that it works. But I cannot generalize it. We made a huge handbook of police training
Yeah.
where we kind of collected all the people and all the ideas. And I mean, that is the starting point, hopefully, for more
What is it? What
research.
is it
But we
called?
do,
Can I put a link into the blog?
yeah,
I,
it's just called Handbook Police Training. So, but it's in German, you know,
yeah.
Handbuch Polizeiliches Einsatztraining, Handbook of Police Training.
Oh, that's
But
great.
it's,
Yeah.
I mean, more than 1,000 pages. So it's very impressive and with a lot of good ideas and a lot of ideas how to couple police training and research. But we do have in Germany, let's say, a kind of structural problem because police um, education takes place in so-called Fachhochschulen, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't have usually the right to make a lot of science and research. They do not have the right to qualify persons for PhD, for example. So that is a kind of structural
Ah,
problem, you
yeah.
know. So it would be
Yeah.
very helpful if they could, qualify students, interested students, to be more scientific about also police training. But
Yeah.
I think we're on a good way.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear. I'm not sure if it was before we started the podcast or was during the podcast, but you told me you loved literature. I I also uh, also some great books from Germany. Like I as a young boy I read Thomas Mann, the Zauberberg,
Mhm. Great.
and Rilke I love very much. And so there were a lot also in philosophy as a it's very strange, but as a 16, 17-year old I tried to understand Hegel,
Oh yeah.
Hegel, yeah, the dialectic, and it was, of course, it was, and I had a professor in university. He was what's called a Hegelian. He was totally,
Mhm.
and he had a very thick skull, and I was so impressed by his by his thinking power. But so philosophy and literature. What is a good book to read? What is a book you love?
Oh, actually, I lost
Yeah, I can hear
one
you still.
airport.
Yeah.
I really, you said Thomas Mann, Zauberberg, one
Yeah.
of my favorite books. I also like Heinrich von Kleist. He died very early, but he was a guy living in the 18th century. But more recent, I would recommend, so in terms of, let's say, ideas, playing with ideas, the work of Niklas Luhmann. Niklas
Niklas
Luhmann.
Newman.
Niklas Luhmann.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is it about?
It's about, let's say, understanding our modern society.
Hmm.
So it's not literature per se. It's more has a more scientific approach, but
Yeah.
it's very yeah. It was a revolution for me to read his work. So
Wow.
if you're looking after that, Niklas Luhmann
Can
is
can can you, can
certainly.
you give me one little hint? What did you learn from him? Just a small.
How modern society works and
Hmm.
why it works this way.
Uh-huh.
So you have those both perspective of reflexivity
Yeah.
to observe many social areas on how they work, and you get an understanding of why do they work this way.
Wow. Great. Also, last question. For people interested in nonlinear pedagogy or maybe even more in constraint-led approach, what is a book you like to give your students to read if they want to?
I would recommend podcasts as yours,
Ah,
and then giving some recommendations. I mean, there's the book from Shaw and colleagues on nonlinear pedagogy and skill acquisition, which is a very good book, and you have a huge amount of literature.
yeah,
So I cannot give just only one recommendation. So the best, I guess, would be to look after literature where it's broken down,
yeah,
where it's turned practical, and that's
yeah,
the way how we use it. We're usually not introducing the constraints-led approach or nonlinear pedagogy at a whole piece, but we slice something out
yeah.
and let's say trainers, coaches, performers play with one idea.
Oh, yeah,
So the same applies for the interested
great.
audience. Um, just look what is going on there. There are many practical applications of
Yeah.
nonlinear pedagogy and a constraints-led approach. So that would be my recommendation. Look after that first, and then get the foundation.
Well, great. Did I forget to ask you something?
I guess not.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you then for this great conversation. We could I could go in all to the different directions, but
Yeah,
I've learned to constrain myself a little bit because otherwise we end up reading Rousseau and other novels. So thank you very much for your inspiration research, and I would like to one time since you are so close, I'd like to visit Keulen, Cologne, and
of
see what's
course.
going on there. So
Yeah,
thank you very
just
much, and we will stay in contact. I will end the podcast, and then I say goodbye. So
yeah, perfect.
thank you for listening to this episode, and I hope you learn a lot as trainers. Till the next time.
Thank you, Eric.